The mainstream media keeps telling you the economy is resilient. They tell you not to panic. They tell you to keep your money in the market, keep your faith in the system, keep scrolling. But behind the scenes, the quietest, largest asset transfer in history is happening. They are liquidating stocks, they are moving to cash, and most importantly, they are buying land. Not beachfront condos, not vacation homes. Land. Remote, defensible, off-grid. While you're standing in the grocery store aisle debating whether to stockpile kidney beans or black beans, Mark Zuckerberg is building a $270 million compound in Hawaii with blast-proof doors, with its own energy grid, with cattle. The man who built the Metaverse is betting his life on cows. Let that sink in for a second. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are public land records, SEC filings, building permits. The information is out there if you know where to look. And I looked. Today, we decode the elite's bugout strategy, the specific locations, the specific features, and the specific threat they are clearly, unmistakably preparing for. This isn't about jealousy. This isn't about politics. This is about one simple principle that has kept survivors alive since the dawn of civilization. Watch what they do, not what they say. So buckle up, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what the people with the best intelligence, the best advisors, and the most resources on the planet are doing with their money. And more importantly, you're going to understand what that means for you. Let's get into it. The survival maxim. Before we dive into bunkers and billionaires, let's establish the ground rules, the philosophical foundation. Because without a framework, you're just collecting trivia. Rule number 1 of the new world. The smart money moves first, moves quiet, and never explains itself. Think about it. When was the last time a hedge fund manager went on television and said, "Hey everyone, I'm about to make $1 billion on this trade. You should do exactly what I'm doing"? Never. That's when. Because the moment everyone knows the play stops working. The same logic applies to survival. These people aren't building bunkers because it's a fun hobby. They aren't buying remote land because they love hiking. They are making calculated, strategic decisions based on threat assessments that you and I will never see. So our job isn't to judge them. Our job is to reverse engineer their logic, to look at the features they're prioritizing, to understand why those features matter. And then, here's the crucial part, to figure out how to apply those same principles on a budget that doesn't require a 9-figure net worth. Because here's the dirty little secret. Most of what they're buying isn't actually that complicated. It's just scaled up. The core principles, water, food, security, community, location, are the same whether you have $200 million or 2,000. They just have nicer walls. Let's start with our first location, and let's start close to home. Segment 1, the concrete graveyard of South Dakota. You want to know what billionaire preppers think about your lone wolf fantasy? They think it's adorable. They think it's quaint. And they think you'll be dead within 6 weeks of any real collapse. That's why the first location on our list isn't a private island. It isn't a mountain fortress accessible only by helicopter. It's a community. A planned, organized, defensible community built inside former military infrastructure. Welcome to Vivos X Point, the largest private survival community on the planet. And it's sitting right in the middle of South Dakota. Here's the intel. Back in the 1940s, the United States Army had a problem. They needed somewhere to store massive quantities of ammunition and explosives. Somewhere remote. Somewhere that could contain catastrophic accidents. Somewhere that could take a hit. So, they built 575 concrete bunkers in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Each one designed to withstand 500,000 pounds of internal blast pressure. Let me put that in perspective. If a bunker full of high explosives detonated, the structure was engineered to contain it, to absorb it, to not become shrapnel. That's military-grade construction. That's not some contractor cutting corners to maximize profit margins. That's the full might of the American war machine, building something designed to survive the worst humanity could throw at it. The Army decommissioned the depot decades ago, and a company called Vivos bought it. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Each bunker is privately owned. You don't buy into a timeshare. You don't rent space. You own the bunker outright. and each one is approximately 2,000 square feet of hardened concrete sitting under 3 feet of earth. The community has its own water wells, its own power infrastructure, its own security protocols, and most importantly, it has people. That last part matters more than you think, because here's the science that the lone wolf fantasy gets wrong. Human beings are not designed to survive alone. We're not bears, we're not tigers, we're pack animals, social animals. Our entire evolutionary advantage comes from cooperation, specialization, and division of labor. One person cannot simultaneously stand guard, grow food, filter water, maintain equipment, provide medical care, and stay sane. It's not possible. The math doesn't work. You will burn out. You will make mistakes. You will die. But a community of 50 people? 100 people? Now you have shifts. Now you have specialization. Now you have someone who knows plumbing while someone else knows medicine, while someone else knows agriculture. The billionaires understand this. That's why they're not buying isolated cabins. They're buying into communities with shared infrastructure and mutual defense agreements. So here's the lesson, and write this down. Your prep is only as good as your network. You need a tribe, not a militia, not a random collection of strangers from the internet. A tribe. People you know, people you trust, people whose skills complement yours. Who's in yours? And if you're sitting there thinking, I don't need other people, I can handle it myself. Congratulations, you've just identified your single biggest vulnerability. But community alone won't save you, because the initial crisis, whatever it turns out to be, is only the beginning. What comes after is where most survival plans fall apart. Which brings us to our next location, and this one is a whole different level.
Segment 2, the Soviet palace where billionaires hide. If Vivos X Point represents the practical, cost-effective approach to survival real estate, our next location represents what happens when you remove all budget constraints entirely. When money is literally no object, when you ask the question, what is the absolute gold standard of apocalypse-proof living? The answer is buried under a mountain in the Czech Republic, and it used to belong to the Soviet Union. Welcome to the Oppidum. Here's the backstory. During the Cold War, the Soviets weren't subtle about their expectations. They genuinely believed a nuclear exchange with the West was not just possible, but probable, and they built accordingly. Deep underground facilities, hardened command centers, bunkers designed to keep the Communist Party elite alive while the surface world burned. One of those facilities was constructed in what is now the Czech Republic, a massive 323,000 square foot complex buried under granite bedrock. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the facility was abandoned, classified, forgotten, until someone very wealthy decided to renovate it. Now it's the most exclusive private bunker on Earth, and the features tell you everything you need to know about what long-term survival actually requires. First, simulated sunlight. This sounds like a luxury feature, something frivolous, but it's not. It's based on hard science. Your body runs on a circadian rhythm, a roughly 24-hour internal clock that regulates sleep, hormone production, mood, immune function, and cognitive performance. That rhythm is primarily calibrated by light, specifically by the changing intensity and color temperature of natural sunlight throughout the day. Take that away? Put someone in a bunker with nothing but artificial fluorescent lighting? Within weeks, their circadian rhythm starts to drift. Sleep becomes erratic, hormone levels become chaotic, depression sets in, cognitive function degrades. This isn't theory, it's documented. Submarine crews experience it, research station personnel in Antarctica experience it. Anyone living in an environment without natural light cycles experiences it. So the Oppidum has full-spectrum LED systems that simulate dawn, daylight, and dusk, that gradually shift color temperature throughout the day, that tell the human body when to be alert and when to rest. They're not just planning to survive, they're planning to stay sane. Second, underground gardens. Hydroponic systems, grow lights, nutrient solutions, the infrastructure to produce fresh vegetables indefinitely without soil, without natural sunlight, without any connection to the surface world. This is where long-term thinking separates the serious from the hobbyists, because canned food runs out, freeze-dried food runs out. every finite resource eventually hits zero. The only sustainable model, the only approach that works on a timeline of years or decades, is renewable production. The ability to create new food rather than simply consuming stored food. And that's exactly what they've built. Third, medical facilities. Not a first aid kit, not a bag of bandages and some antibiotics. Actual medical facilities, operating rooms, diagnostic equipment, the infrastructure to handle serious trauma and illness without any external support. Because here's a reality that most preppers don't want to face. In a true collapse scenario, you are going to get hurt. You are going to get sick. Infections will happen. Accidents will happen. Appendicitis will happen. And without medical infrastructure, survivable injuries become death sentences. The people building these facilities understand that. They're not just planning for the initial crisis, they're planning for the thousands small crises that come after. So, here's the lesson. Your prep needs to account for mental health and renewable food production. Does your current plan include a way to grow food indoors? Does it include provisions for psychological stability during extended confinement? Because they're not thinking about the first week, they're thinking about the first decade. But even the most sophisticated bunker has one fundamental weakness, one vulnerability that no amount of money can fully eliminate. You have to get there first. Which brings us to our next location. And this one isn't about bunkers at all. It's about something far more important: geography. Segment 3, where the wind doesn't blow. Let me ask you a question. When you picked your bug-out location, and I'm assuming you have one because you're watching this video, what factors did you consider? Distance from major cities? Check. Water access? Check. Defensibility? Check. But did you check the prevailing wind patterns? No? Interesting. Because some of the wealthiest, most well-informed people on the planet made that their primary consideration. And the location they chose tells you exactly what scenario they're most worried about. Welcome to Patagonia, the southern tip of South America, where Argentina and Chile dissolve into islands, fjords, and endless wilderness. This is not a convenient location. It's thousands of miles from any major population center. It's cold, it's remote, the infrastructure is minimal. Getting there requires significant planning and resources. So why are billionaires buying massive tracts of land there? The Bush family, Ted Turner, multiple tech executives, acres upon acres of remote Patagonian wilderness quietly changing hands over the past 2 decades. The answer is atmospheric physics. Let me explain. When a nuclear weapon detonates, it doesn't just destroy things, it creates fallout. Radioactive particles that get swept into the atmosphere and distributed by wind patterns. That fallout then settles over the following days, weeks, and months, contaminating soil, water, and everything else it touches. Now here's the critical part. The Earth's atmosphere is not one unified system. It's divided into cells. The Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere have largely separate circulation patterns. Air that rises in the tropics creates a barrier, a kind of atmospheric wall, that makes it very difficult for particles to cross from one hemisphere to the other. What does this mean in practical terms? If a nuclear exchange happens in the Northern Hemisphere, which is where all the major nuclear powers are located, where all the likely targets are located, where all the strategic assets are located, the resulting fallout would overwhelmingly stay in the Northern Hemisphere. The Southern Hemisphere, and Patagonia specifically, sits in what atmospheric scientists call the cleanest air on Earth, the furthest point from Northern Hemisphere contamination patterns, the safest place to be if the unthinkable happens. That's why the smart money is buying land there. But it's not just about radiation avoidance. Patagonia sits on top of one of the largest freshwater reserves in the world. Glaciers feeding into rivers, feeding into aquifers. Clean, abundant water in an era when water scarcity is becoming one of the defining geopolitical challenges of our time. And it has incredibly low population density. Space to breathe, space to build, space to survive without competing with millions of desperate refugees. So here's the lesson, and it's a big one. Location isn't just about distance from threats. It's about understanding how threats propagate, how contamination spreads, how wind and water and geography shape the long-term survivability of any given region. When you picked your bug-out location, did you consider fallout drift patterns? Did you consider prevailing winds? Did you consider watershed contamination routes? They did. Now, Patagonia might not be accessible to you. Most of us don't have the resources to buy land in another hemisphere. But the principle still applies. Understanding how your local geography interacts with potential threats is fundamental to intelligent preparation. Know the wind, know the water, know the terrain. But geography, as important as it is, can't solve every problem. Because some of the threats we face aren't physical at all. They're institutional. And that brings us to our next location, the one where Silicon Valley goes when they think America itself might not survive.
Segment 4. The Technocrats' Escape Hatch. There's a question that keeps me up at night. And I think it probably keeps you up too. What happens if the system itself breaks? Not a temporary disruption, not a hurricane or an earthquake or even a pandemic. What happens if the fundamental institutions that hold society together, the rule of law, the currency, the basic social contracts, what happens if those things fail? It's called WROL in prepper circles. Without rule of law, the scenario where badges don't mean anything, contracts can't be enforced, and property rights exist only as long as you can defend them. Most preppers think about this in terms of short-term chaos, the riots, the looting, the immediate violence. But the billionaires are thinking about something different. They're thinking about what happens after the chaos settles, after some form of order reemerges. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Order always reemerges. Humans can't function in pure chaos indefinitely. We organize, we form hierarchies, we create systems. The question is, what systems? And under whose rules? The people who have benefited most from the current system are asking themselves a terrifying question. What if the next system doesn't benefit them? What if the new order views them as villains? What if their wealth becomes a liability rather than an asset? That's why they're buying citizenship in New Zealand. Peter Thiel, the PayPal founder, early Facebook investor, one of the most powerful figures in Silicon Valley. He didn't just buy land in New Zealand, he bought citizenship, full legal status, a second passport, a backup nationality. He's not alone. Multiple tech executives have done the same thing. Quietly, carefully, without press releases or announcements. Building legal redundancy the same way engineers build system redundancy. Because here's what New Zealand offers that almost nowhere else can match. First, physical isolation. New Zealand is literally at the bottom of the world. 8,000 miles from North America. 1,200 miles from the nearest major landmass. If you want to be far from Northern Hemisphere problems, geopolitical, nuclear, pandemic, or otherwise, it's hard to do better. Second, political stability. New Zealand has been a functioning democracy for over a century. Peaceful transitions of power, strong institutions, low corruption. The kind of institutional resilience that looks increasingly valuable as other Western democracies show signs of strain. Third, self-sufficiency potential. Despite its small population, New Zealand produces enough food to feed 30 to 40 million people. That's 10 times its current population. In a global food crisis, that matters. Fourth, and this is the one that matters most to the billionaires, a legal system that still respects property rights. In a true systemic collapse, assets held in other jurisdictions become questionable. Bank accounts can be frozen. Properties can be seized. Wealth can evaporate if the legal framework that defines it ceases to function. But if you have citizenship in a stable country, property rights recognized by a functioning government, assets protected by legitimate legal institutions, that's real. That survives. They're not just buying land. They're buying insurance against the failure of the system that made them wealthy in the first place. So here's the lesson. They have a Plan B passport. You might not be able to buy foreign citizenship. New Zealand has actually tightened their investor visa requirements in response to the influx of tech billionaires, but the principle applies at every scale. Do you have a Plan B location outside your city? Outside your state? Do you have documentation cached in multiple places? Do you have options? The people with the best information and the most resources have spent millions developing backup identities, backup locations, backup everything. They don't trust any single system to survive. They hedge. What's your hedge? But even New Zealand has limitations. It still requires infrastructure. It still requires transport. It still requires everything to work just enough to get you there. What if you need to survive entirely on your own resources? What if total self-sufficiency is the only option? That brings us to our final location, the one that reveals the most about what these people actually believe is coming. Segment 5, the Metaverse King's Cattle Ranch, and number 1, the one everyone is whispering about, The one that reveals the deepest truth about what the tech elite actually believe when the cameras are off and the PR teams are gone. Mark Zuckerberg's compound in Kauai, Hawaii. Let's talk about what we know, because the details are staggering. Zuckerberg has acquired over 1,400 acres on the north shore of Kauai through a series of purchases beginning in 2014. That alone would be remarkable. 1,400 acres in one of the most expensive real estate markets in America. But it's what he's building that tells the real story. First, a compound. Not a house, not an estate, a compound. Multiple structures, guest houses, administrative buildings, infrastructure spread across the property. Second, blast-proof doors and windows. The kind of construction designed to withstand not just weather, but deliberate attack. The kind of hardening you see in embassy buildings, in military installations, in facilities designed for worst-case scenarios. Third, its own energy grid, independent power generation. The ability to function entirely off the main electrical infrastructure. Solar, presumably. Battery storage, almost certainly. Complete energy autonomy. Fourth, and here's the one that should make you sit up and pay attention. Massive ranching operations, cattle, agriculture, the infrastructure to produce food at scale. The man who built Facebook, the man who renamed his company Meta, the man who has spent billions trying to convince you that the future is virtual reality, digital avatars, and online existence. That man is betting his actual survival on cattle. Let me say that again because I want it to sink in. The king of the Metaverse is building a farm, not a server farm, not a data center. An actual, physical, animals and crops farm. Why? Because he knows something that his public persona would never admit. When the systems fail, really fail, completely fail, digital assets become worthless. Your cryptocurrency doesn't matter. Your social media following doesn't matter. Your digital land in the metaverse doesn't matter. What matters is food, water, shelter, security, beef, water, and walls. That's the reality that Zuckerberg is preparing for. While he sells you the vision of a digital future, he's personally investing in the most analog, most physical, most fundamental forms of wealth that exist. Cows. That's his survival strategy. Not blockchain, not AI cows. Now let's talk about why Hawaii specifically. Kauai offers something unique. It's American soil, so property rights and legal protections apply, but it's also incredibly isolated. 2,500 miles from the continental United States, 2,400 miles from the nearest major landmass in any direction. That isolation is the point. In a collapse scenario, Kauai becomes essentially independent. No land connection means no refugee waves. No border to defend against mass migration. The Pacific Ocean becomes a moat, and the Hawaiian Islands are remarkably self-sufficient in terms of climate. You can grow food year-round. Fresh water falls from the sky regularly. The temperature never reaches extremes. It's one of the few places on Earth where bear survival is actually relatively easy, if you have the land. Zuckerberg has the land. He also has something else, a security team. A trained, professional, well-equipped security team. And this brings us to the most important part of this entire video. Because the security team isn't just there to protect against burglars or paparazzi. It's there for the scenario Zuckerberg and his advisors have clearly gamed out. The scenario where society has broken down and armed protection is the only thing standing between the compound and chaos. But that raises a question. A question so important that it's apparently the only thing billionaires want to talk about when they discuss survival. A question that reveals their deepest fear. The twist, the guard problem futurist Douglas Rushkoff received an unusual invitation a few years ago. 5 hedge fund billionaires wanted to meet with him, in private, off the record, at an exclusive resort. Rushkoff expected to discuss technology, the future of markets, maybe artificial intelligence, the usual Silicon Valley topics. Instead, they spent the entire meeting asking him one question. How do I keep my security guards loyal to me after the money becomes worthless? Let that sink in. These are men worth collectively tens of billions of dollars. They have access to the best advisors, the best intelligence, the best information on Earth. They've built bunkers. They've bought land. They've stockpiled resources. And their biggest fear isn't the bomb. It isn't the virus. It isn't the collapse itself. Their biggest fear is the day after. The day when their authority, which is entirely based on their ability to pay, evaporates. The day when a $100 bill is just paper. When a bank balance is just a number. When the entire financial system that defines their power ceases to function. On that day, why would anyone take orders from them? Think about it. Really think about it. You're a trained security professional. You have guns, you have combat skills, you have survival training, you're standing in a fully stocked bunker with years of supplies. Your boss, who is physically weaker than you, less skilled than you, less useful than you, says something you don't like. What's stopping you from just taking over? The money? The money is worthless now. The law? There is no law now. The loyalty? Based on what? This is the billionaire nightmare, and it's why their prep, despite all its sophistication, contains a fundamental flaw. They don't have skills. They have purchased skills. They don't have relationships. They have transactional arrangements. They don't have community. They have staff. And staff quits when the paycheck bounces. Rushkoff said the billionaires proposed all sorts of solutions. Shock collars, food locks that only they could open, secret codes and biometric safeguards. Every solution was about control, about domination, about maintaining hierarchy through force or manipulation. Not one solution was about genuine relationship, about mutual respect, about being useful enough to the group that they would want to keep you around. They couldn't imagine earning loyalty. They could only imagine coercing it. And that reveals everything you need to know about the difference between their approach and yours. The final punch. So let's bring it all together. The billionaires are preparing. That much is undeniable. The land purchases, the bunker construction, the citizenship acquisitions, it's all public record. They see something coming. Maybe nuclear war, maybe systemic economic collapse, maybe pandemic, maybe climate catastrophe, maybe something we haven't predicted yet. Whatever it is, they're taking it seriously. They're buying hardened shelters with military-grade construction. They're prioritizing locations based on atmospheric patterns and geographic isolation. They're building renewable food and water systems designed to last decades. They're acquiring backup citizenships in stable, isolated nations. They're investing in the most fundamental physical forms of wealth: land, cattle, water. And yet, their biggest fear isn't any external threat. Their biggest fear is their own people. The guards, the staff, the team they've assembled to keep them alive. Because they understand, on some level they understand, that their model is built on sand. That control through payment only works when payment means something. That authority through wealth only functions within a system that recognizes wealth. Remove the system and their authority vanishes. You have something they don't. Adaptability. You don't need a $270 million compound because you don't have an army of employees who might turn on you the moment society fractures. You don't need a private jet to Patagonia because you've learned to solve problems with what's available instead of what can be purchased. You don't need to keep security guards loyal because your network isn't built on transactions. It's built on trust, on shared experience, on genuine mutual investment. They have billions. You have skills. They have staff. You have tribe. They have bunkers. You have adaptability. Which one of those survives the transition? I know where I'd place my bet. So here's my question for you. The one I want you to really think about. The one I want you to answer in the comments below. What is your primary bug-out trigger? Not vague feelings, not general anxiety. A specific, concrete event. What has to happen for you to grab your bag and leave? What crosses the line from concerning to we're going now? Because the billionaires have their triggers. They've wargamed the scenarios. They've established the criteria. When X happens, they move. No hesitation, no debate. Do you have that same clarity? If the answer is no, that's your homework. Define the trigger. Write it down. Share it with your tribe. Make the decision now, in calm conditions, so you don't have to make it in chaos. Because when the moment comes, and I'm not saying it will, but if it comes, hesitation is death. The elites won't hesitate. They'll be in their helicopters while you're still checking Twitter to see if it's really that bad. Don't be that person. Stay aware, stay prepared, stay connected. This is Fallout Raccoon. I'll see you in the next one. Postscript, the Raccoon's observation. One more thing, and this is just between us. Notice what none of the billionaire bunkers contain. Not the public versions anyway. Prisons, detention facilities, spaces for holding people against their will. Now maybe that's just an oversight. Maybe those features exist and we don't know about them. Or maybe it tells you something about what happens when the gates close. Maybe the communities they're building are self-selected. Everyone inside chosen carefully. Everyone outside written off. They're not building arcs for humanity. They're building lifeboats for themselves. And they're already deciding who gets a seat. Something to think about while you're building your own version. Okay, now I'm really done.